Welcome back. It's warm outside in Manila, but I can't say the same about this room. Let's warm it up with conversation. And welcome to my panelists. I would like to say warm welcome, but then, yeah, we'll let her get there. Right. The question that you have at hand is, while we have great solutions typically for the haves, there are the have-nots, the people who have either a lack of infrastructure or a lack of economic viability because of scale, or lack of affordability. All these people get left behind when it comes to providing solutions. People actually go after lucrative markets and offer solutions and ignore the rest of the world where the dividends are lower. MOSIP's journey was about trying to get everyone included, not just in the countries we operate in, but it's also about the ignored set of countries. We are trying to figure out here with our set of experts, what are the levers that we have that we can work on to actually make great solutions available everywhere for everyone. For this, I'm going to make some assumptions, first of all, by trying to simplify the problem. My panel constitution is also according to this simplification. I look at this as, if we want DPIs for smaller populations, island nations, emerging markets, we have to deal with many challenges. The first set of challenge is around infrastructure, right? Do you have the connectivity? Do you have the data centers? The infrastructure is one problem. The second problem is that technology is quite always changing, and it has its own complexity. So there is a huge bill of material that we need to deal with whenever we are talking about technology. And so it's not enough to know one thing to deploy solutions. You need to know 10 things, 15 things, right? The manageability is an issue. The third is, when it comes to functional applications, the needs are not necessarily always the same, or sometimes it's the same, irrespective of where we are, irrespective of the scale. How do we package something and make it available for their context with some tweaking, the capability of tweaking it to their context without having to jump through complex hoops, right? So this is how I looked at the framing of the problem. If we can address each of these, we would address many questions. So I would like to ask Pete, who's on my left here, the first question. A lot of countries here, we have been hearing the need for solutions, but we also have been hearing the need for data sovereignty and control. Like, they want to have control over their own infrastructure. They want to be masters of business continuity. AWS has been in the business of setting up data centers and infrastructure and making it available. So you do understand to a large extent what are the challenges behind setting up a data center. So if these countries want to have their own infrastructure, what does it take to set up a good data center? Maybe not a world-class data center, but a good data center.
Thanks for that nice, easy introduction. So yeah, I think data center, and I think plural, we've got to start with plural in that sense. Having worked in government for many years when we used to run our own data centers, and more recently, obviously, in the cloud business, I've seen that, I think, from both sides. And it was never enough to just have one data center. So everything I'm going to talk about means you've got presumably at least two data centers, because if the first one goes out of action for some reason, power, disruption, whatever it might be, then you need some kind of failover and resilience, right? So at a really simplistic level, straight away you're going to need at least 2 data centers. Now they've got to be geographically distant. You can't have them right next to each other, because one event that would take out one will probably take out the other. And some of the risk analysis workshops I remember being in government would talk about if a plane was to crash, for example, how far away will the other data center need to be, right? So there's a proper, whole range of scenarios which you just cannot even begin to predict that you need to cater for. So then you need 2 physical locations. You're going to need to think about physical security of the premises and of the buildings that you're in. Obviously, you're going to need a whole bunch of deep skills and expertise around installation of infrastructure. The infrastructure that you have in those data centers needs to be procured up front, bought up front. You need to replace it periodically as it runs out of date, as it breaks, as it needs failover. You've then got energy supply, and again, what if the energy supply goes down? You've got water and cooling options that might be needed. So I'm just listing through many, many things that need to be done for setting up a data center. And that's before you've even got workloads running inside of that data center. So then having all of the resilience and failover inside of your data center also means that you need good cybersecurity protections, good resilience posture to protect those customers, tenants, bits of government that want to come in inside and start using your data center. So there's a huge amount involved in setting up and running data centers, of course. We have this slightly jokey T-shirt that we wear inside of our teams, which says, friends don't let friends run data centers, which is just to say it's a big, hard job. And I think I am a cloud provider, of course I'm gonna say this, but I think if government can focus on things that are unique and special to government, and commodity things like running data centers can be relatively easily met by the private sector, then that makes a lot of sense. Now we'll move on and we will talk about sovereignty and local control and local residency of data. Of course, they all need to be taken into account. And not everybody has a massive hyperscale data center in their country they can easily avail themselves for. So I think as the conversation progresses, we will talk about that and what we are doing as an industry to try and make that easier. But first of all, you need to be bold and brave and have a lot of money, I think, to get started building your own data centers when there are other options available that we should be considering.
Thank you. Miro, there's a whole class of people out there who reside in the cloud. Everybody worships them, called DevOps engineers, right? I'm sure that if you have government IT departments or software development shops, you'll recognize what I'm saying. DevOps engineers take care of this magic of dealing with all these infrastructure components at the hardware level and then the application infrastructure level. When it comes to, let's say, a country wanting to manage its own set of applications, what do you think are the skills required at the country level to manage a complex bill of material to keep applications up and running?
Yes, so I think data centers is a very big problem that you have to solve. And once you solve this problem, and you have to kind of accrue a lot of expertise to actually even start thinking about tackling the problem, the open source solutions are usually my favorite. But by spending the last 15 years doing open source and contributing to open source project, I do know how difficult it is, and now from my penetration testing expertise as well, I know how hard it is actually to stay on top of everything that could actually possibly go wrong. So it sometimes might be whether you have the expertise already that you might be able to utilize, and then open source could be something that you can do and think about. Before you even start thinking about DevOps, those are going to be the things that usually DevOps are not even going to touch, that you still need on top of your data center that you have to address before we can even start talking about DevOps and deployments. If not, then maybe another solution would be let's focus on DevOps and let's focus on third parties, whether it's going to be a data center by a commercial partner or whether it's going to be in a public cloud. Those are all the options, and they will have slightly different challenges. For sure, the open source one gives you the most control, but it comes with a lot of technical depth that you will have to address, because if not addressed, the open source solution treated as a nice, cheap, free option is not going to work at that scale. It's just not something that you should think in those kind of categories.
Thanks, Miro. I now know why DevOps engineers are worshipped. They never give their secrets away. Anusree, when it comes to an application, let's say something even as simple as an ID system or email or a workflow application, a simple process, there are always variations between the requirement in one department to another or one country to another. Maybe it's a change in the languages that are involved. Maybe there are cultural differences, the date format has to be different. There are a lot of small things. But there are also many things about how processors are defined by the laws of the land or how they have evolved over time, what people are used to. If we want to take an application which works well in one place and put it in another, it might require a lot of configuration, customization, and change. What are the challenges? Like what kind of skill sets or capabilities are required in every new geography where a solution has to be rolled out, right, in order to make it work in that context?
Yeah, so I'm going to take an example of a DPG and maybe try and explain it. So I think there are like certain best practices that we can follow when we are writing the code or the technology itself. And when we talk about different geographies, there is obviously very clear capacity constraints. With my work with CDPI over the last 2 years, we've worked with countries of different scales and sizes, ranging from maybe, say, Brazil to British Virgin Islands or Malawi, which is like in between. So ranging from multi-millions to like a few 100,000s. So when you talk about the code itself, I think the key for it to be rolled out in any geography is what can you productize, how can you package it, so that anyone can implement it with a relatively lower skill set. I'm not saying like the bar is eliminated, but relatively lower skill set. And also implementing that